Today on Overwatch This, we predict the future for Overwatch in 2017, including the game itself, the animated shorts, events, and the Overwatch League. Hello everybody and welcome to episode 13, lucky 13 as they say, of Overwatch This. It's Joel, obviously, here with Ben once more.
Hello everyone.
And this is going to be our Overwatch 2017 prediction special. So we've sort of broken this down into some sections, one of which is Overwatch, but it makes more sense than that. This is the game Overwatch rather than the ecosystem Overwatch. So I guess the thing that people want to know more than anything is who are the next Overwatch heroes going to be and when are they going to come out? So Ben, exactly who are they going to be?
Dates, times.
Exactly when are they going to come out? Go.
That I don't know, sadly.
That's the end of today's show.
Thanks thanks. That's good. See you in 2017. No, it's difficult to predict, right? Like, we've had 2 heroes since launch. That's been 7 months. I would expect to probably have more than 2 every 7 months in general.
Interesting.
But so the easiest comparison is obviously League of Legends and Dota, right? League of Legends had 6 champions. There we go. Got there in the end. 6 champions in 2016. Dota 2 goes like a year without introducing one sometimes. But both of them in their first years early on, when Dota 2 was porting all the heroes from the Warcraft 3 custom map, and when League of Legends was just developing itself as a MOBA, had way more. Like in 2009, the year League of Legends came out, it launched with like 20 heroes and added another 20.
But they've also got loads of heroes.
Yeah,
and
exactly,
I don't see Overwatch as a game that's ever going to have 100 heroes.
No, they've pretty much said that they don't want to get up that high. I don't remember if they've put like a limit on it. The way I always think about it is I can't really imagine the game with more than 50 in like 10 years.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I wouldn't expect it to have 50 by 2020 is the example that I kind of came up with off the top of my head for what we were doing today.
I don't think, you say we'll get more than 2 in 7 months. I'm not sure if we will, and if we do, I don't think it'll be... In fact, I think at that rate, I think it'll be less. I think we'll either get 2 or 3 in 2017.
Oh, right, okay.
I would say 3.
You don't think it's going to hit 4? Because 4 is kind of where I was thinking it might
That's one every
land.
3 months, right?
Yeah,
and
which is as common as the events have.
Given that, yeah, exactly. Given how much of a tease they seem to want to put out, we'd basically be starting the tease for the next one now, and I don't think they're ready to do that. We don't even have. We've got a map. We're still waiting to come to public release. I reckon 2, maybe 3 in 2017.
I think that's definitely a safe bet. And I mean, the thing to remember here is, we're not going to get to a point where I think there was a point in League of Legends where they were releasing a new champion like every 3 weeks.
Yeah,
like when they were really in grinding them out mode.
Overwatch, I really don't.
Yeah, it's not. And the Riot team has since said that was a mistake, and what they ended up with was a bunch of either useless or very samey heroes.
Yeah,
that they've now had to go back. Champions that they've now had to go back and redefine those champions, redesign half their abilities or something just to make them interesting. And that isn't a position that I think we'll ever see Overwatch get into. I think if they ever make someone that has even one ability that feels too similar to another character, they won't put them out. They'll either redesign them totally or just not release them. I think the closest we'll get is something like how Sombra's guns feel a little bit like Tracer's guns, but then because of the clip size, it's like totally different, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I guess we'll have that, but we'll have the space between that will be filled with other things, right? And by now we know what those things are going to be. Like, as I said, we've got another map incoming. More modes is almost a given, be they more throwaway things like the Christmas snowball fight type thing, or more concrete modes that persist, and more playing dress up. Basically, we'll have a lot of that at regular intervals throughout the year, as we've had since summer, I guess. Yeah,
pretty much. That's also the easiest way to expand the game, right? In terms of a competitive diversity thing, having more maps is always really important. And there's we'll get onto something very specific about that in a second. But also, they've made it very easy for them to make new modes. They've designed a system where they can implement new modes in the arcade, and then if people really, really like them, they can do something else with them. Like they've said, we kind of want to get a competitive 3v3 ladder going. Maybe they want to make a competitive 1v1 ladder. We talked about a lot of this in the episodes that were about them. So they've made a system where they can make a mode that they think is maybe fun, but they're not sure, and they can put it out, and 4 million people will play it that day or whatever. And that's just the kind of testing you can't pay for. You just can't get that level of testing.
It's a really good test.
And they'll immediately find out if it's viable as something to be wider or not. So modes will now be very easy for them to develop and implement, both in terms of they can now put out prototypes and they can turn those into more proper things.
Yeah, and then there's a few things that we're listing here as kind of concerns or issues that would probably need addressing, one of which, as you say, relates to maps and is sort of a fairly in-depth look at certain maps that aren't perhaps functioning correctly or as best they could.
Yeah, basically the 2 CP maps, which is stuff like Hanamura, where you capture 1 point and that's a little easy, and then the second point is much harder to capture, much easier to defend. Those are just proving not particularly viable competitively. They get the most draws. Basically, the first point is too easy to take, the second point is too difficult to take, I think is basically how it works. And in general, defending has become something that's very easy to do in Overwatch because there are so many powerful abilities and you can hold like a charge coming at you and that sort of thing. Stuff like the Symmetra redesign comes into this, where she saw a bit of play at the couple of tournaments that we were talking about last week that happened this weekend. And like, if you put up a shield generator, if you manage to get that up on a pro team, the enemy team has to basically sacrifice everything just to kill the shield generator, and then your team still has, you know, all their ults and all the rest of it to keep defending. So those maps are proving a problem. Maps in general are something that held StarCraft 2 back quite significantly when it launched. It had some really bad maps. Maps were too small. They'd used some basic design principles from the original game, but they hadn't really implemented them in ways that worked well. That's been fixed, but that's taken like 5 years to fix. That isn't something that, you know, they'll want to do with Overwatch. If you look at something like Counter-Strike, that's been using the same maps for like 20 years. You know, someone made Dust 2 and they went, yeah, we're gonna play on that map for the next, you know, however long. They do tweaks to them, and those tweaks are small in size, but have a major impact on how the game is actually played at the highest level. But you know, Dust 2 still looks like Dust 2. I don't know which of these Blizzard will want to go forward with. I don't know if they'll want to end up with just, all right, all tournaments play on these 4 maps, and thankfully the game is good enough that it holds that up.
I don't think you want that, really.
I don't think so. I think with the amount of diversity there is in heroes, that maybe doesn't work. But then you say that, like Dota 2 and League of Legends have 1 map that's never changed, but they have way more heroes, right? So
I still can't abide by that. That's no solution in my mind.
Yeah,
I take the point though.
And we've talked about this before, that the Overwatch kind of sits in this very weird, unique position where it is, you know, obviously you look at Overwatch and you go, oh, they've made a first-person MOBA. Okay, fine. But actually that's something very, very different. And with this number of players and a competitive scene, they are in new territory. So the answer will probably be, no, it won't be, you know, the same 4 maps that we've always had, and it won't be something like StarCraft where there's more than that and it takes a long time to get there. I expect it'll be something new. We just don't know what it is yet, but it is something that's going to need to be fixed probably over the next 12 months. Yeah,
and I guess a problem that I suppose that, as you say, links into some of the difficulty with capture points, etc., is ults, right? And it's, I don't know if it's a thing that can be solved. I mean, you've suggested a solution of just removing ults, but I don't think that is a solution.
Yeah, I
but
don't think so.
Games like this that have those kind of abilities can become, you just wait for the clock to tick up to your ult.
Yeah, exactly.
To come, or you do that as a team in a more coordinated way in competitive play. But that is an issue, right? And that is an issue that I don't see an easy solution to. Admittedly, I'm not a designer on Overwatch, but I do think it's a difficult one to solve.
Yeah, I can't imagine this isn't something that hasn't run through their minds. And like, yeah, so you could remove ults, then obviously you need to rebalance the game completely, because there's some stuff that you just need ults to get past. Some, you know, turtling defenses behind Tourbillon turrets and all the rest of it. You just, you know, one ult will clear it out, but if ults aren't in the game, then you have a problem. The other thing is, like, ults are such a large part of like the personality of heroes. Like, Pharah is only Pharah because of like the massive chest missiles move. Like, that's what people recognize her for, even if it isn't used that much or it isn't something that she's always using all the time. That's like how you recognize that it's her. Same with like Tracer with the sticky bomb and all the rest of it. So I don't think removing ults is a solution that they can use, but there is definitely a problem there where it's like a lot of the game can come down to, particularly at the highest levels, you just kind of sit and stare at each other for a bit while your ults gain. And originally ults didn't gain through time, and they also didn't gain through self-healing, and they added a bunch of this stuff in. They used to gain from taking damage, but that proved to be like problematic for a bunch of different reasons, because basically if you were a tank taking damage and being healed, that was like double ult gain for your team, as it were. So yeah, there are a bunch of problems there. I don't know what the solution is. I don't know if it needs a solution. It's possible that the answer is just add a bunch more heroes until it's not a problem anymore, until there's so many...
I don't know if that just makes it more of a problem.
Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? And it would involve certain designs being specifically perhaps interacting with ults in a certain way. Like, for example, Sombra. Like, if Sombra has her ult and your whole team has their ult, but then Sombra hits you with her ult, your team can't use theirs.
That's, I think,
and all that time you spent building it was useless.
It's the interesting solution is to introduce characters who shake that up with either with their ults or just with their general style of play, which isn't so reliant on that kind of thing. But yeah, it's a tricky one.
A lot of this ties into like the other problem as well, like with maps, and ties into character design, as we're saying, where it is probably possible to create characters and maps where ult gain becomes less of a resource, like less of an important resource, where there are still moments where you want to do that, because obviously that isn't a problem in itself. It's only a problem to have teams building ults when that's all they're ever doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, that isn't boring if it happens once every couple of maps. It is boring if it's happening every 3 minutes, every single map. So yeah, it's a problem. I don't know what the solution is. I expect the answer for 2017 will be them trying to do map and class design to battle against this in some way. But if that doesn't work, then going forward they might need to make a more drastic solution.
And the final thing we're going to whinge about in this game we love and make a weekly show on is tanks, and the balance of teams and tanks.
Yeah, so tanks are like pretty much what the meta is built around at the moment. This is very much at the highest level. Like, if you just play some casual Overwatch, you play random heroes mode, you play free for all, you play quick play, even if you play competitive at like a lower level or whatever, this maybe isn't a problem that you've seen. But basically, like, the best lineup at the tournaments that were this weekend, 33% of the time from a meta report I was looking at this morning, was 4 tanks and 2 healers. No DPS classes, no defense heroes. Not good, is it? Only 2 healers actually being used. It was just Ana and Lucio. And like, this is, a wider balance problem. The thing is, a lot of this stuff is rotating. So the week before, it wasn't 4 tanks. It was like 2 or 3 tanks and a couple of DPS, and then the same 2 healers. Whether this is solvable, again, by anything more than just playing with the balance until it's nice, I don't know. But when, like, the best team is Lucio, Ana, Reinhardt, D.Va, Roadhog, Zarya, that is a problem. Like, that isn't a diverse team. That's 4 of one class and 2 of another. Defense heroes have always been a problem. They haven't been something that people have found useful. That is something that Blizzard will see as a challenge to fix. Like, even if the meta was super fun and everyone was enjoying it, and even though, if all the other heroes were being used, they would still see that as a problem. So yeah, like, that needs to change. Tanks are the main bit of that's a problem, because they're doing more damage while being able to take more damage, and also having, protection tools and all the rest of it. But again, what the solution is, other than a bunch of nerfs and a bunch of buffs,
the thing is, I don't know if there is a solution in that. I think what you get with this is that there is actually no golden mean. There's no sweet spot, and you'd rebalance it, and you'd be left with, you'd take that problem away, and then you'd have another problem. I think with a game like this, with so many systems interacting, there is no perfect balance, but in a way that's okay. Like, it's all right that these things are cyclical. If they fix one thing and introduce a new problem elsewhere, I think we just have to sort of suck it down and go, look, this is a game. It's played by humans. It has a load of systems that have to, mesh and clash and bounce off each other, and I don't think any developer's going to be able to make it absolutely perfect all the time now and forever. And then what? If you get to that point, you can never introduce a new map or a new hero. So
even if they get to a point where, like, Dota 2 was in a really, really good spot before patch 7, and patch 7 is like a totally new game that people are jokingly calling Dota 3. So I think that the bit that is worrying is twofold. One is that Blizzard has classically been a company that hasn't been very quick to react. The Overwatch team has been faster than their other teams, and they're getting quicker, because I think they've just realised it's been a problem, particularly over the last couple of years. But like, if this meta stays this way for 6 months, then that is a problem. It's fine for the game to be cyclical, like you're saying, but if it's cyclical in like an 8-month pattern or something, then people are just going to get bored. The other issue is that Kaplan has come out in the forums, and the team in general have been very negative to the idea of bans, like some sort of kind of system that can be used where games aren't predictable, because teams can decide, okay, this game there's not going to be any Roadhog, or there's not going to be any D.Va or something. That's what Dota 2 and League of Legends lean on a lot to maintain like some sort of competitive surprise, because while the games are 5v5, there's actually another like 10 heroes or 6 champions or whatever that aren't played in that game, and the order in which they're banned and all the rest of it, that all matters as well. So them being against that might mean that, hey, maybe they'll come up with a better system, but it also means that we don't have that in place for the balance to kind of have as a crutch to hold itself up, even when it's a little dodgy like it is.
Yeah, but you can't beg them for new stuff and like want your game to evolve and yet want it to stay in this perfect state of balanced stasis. You can't have it both ways. So I think it's just a problem we'll have to contend with, and it might get more severe and then less severe and then more severe, but that's the evolution of a game nowadays. It's an online competitive game, and that's just kind of the way they work. Right, we'll move on now to animated shorts, of which we've had some, and we will have more. I suppose, again, the interesting thing is the cadence and when we think they'll be delivered, and how many we think we'll get over the course of the next 12 months.
Yeah, so this year we've had 6. That was 4 in Season 1, which was the pre-launch season that went all the way up to Soldier 76's Hero Cinematic, which I think was released like either on launch day or like 2 days before. And then we've had 2 since then, which was Bastions and then Sombras that came with her character reveal at BlizzCon. I would expect that each new character will get their own.
Yeah.
So I guess from what we were saying earlier, that would probably be 2 or 3 right there.
Yeah.
But we also are fairly sure that the next one is going to be based around Zarya, just kind of going off the end of the Sombra cinematic. And also she's just a character that hasn't had a lot of development. She hasn't had her own comic and that sort of thing. So how many are we going to get a year? I think 6 is a reasonable number.
Yeah, I'd say so. It feels to me, though there's been 6 this year, I feel like there's been less than I expected since launch.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think maybe
since
people were
launch,
expecting 3 or 4.
Middle of May, seems light to me. So I would expect maybe the same number, but them to be spaced out more evenly across the course of the year.
Yeah, I think that seems reasonable. I don't know what they'll tie them to. What's interesting is they kind of, and we're going to talk about events in a second, but they've got like a load of different ways that they put attention back on the game. Most games don't get 7 months of being like really interesting games that loads of people are talking about.
No, that's true.
And when, like, for example, that comic dropped last night, that was all anybody I knew was talking about for like half an hour. That is something that only usually happens when a game launches. So they have loads of different ways to bring attention back to it.
I don't know what you're talking about, Ben. Everyone's still talking about Battleborn.
Yes, no, I haven't stopped talking about Titanfall 2 or Battlefield 1 or anything else. So yeah, like, those things all bring attention back to the game. But I don't think they want to tie, for example, the cinematics to events, because the events already give loads of attention to the game. And also the events are kind of like not really a storyline thing. They're just like, here's a thing, here's a bunch of cosmetics and some new stuff to play. So I wouldn't expect them to be tied to that. I would expect them to be tied to new characters, because people just like them, and like it's the best way to show off a new character, like hint at their abilities and all the rest of it. And then of course there's the comics, like the one we saw last night.
Yeah, so we had last night, we had Tracer's comic, and again, I think, as you say, that they're a way of evolving the character, or well, specifically the character, rather than, I guess, the overarching plot in this case. Yeah,
what they used that comic to do is it showed lots of stuff about lots of different characters. There was the big thing that Tracer has a girlfriend, and that was a big surprise, but there was also like a 2-page spread that had loads of little details about what the characters were up to at Christmas that gave kind of a little bit of hint as to their character, like Widowmaker was at the grave of her husband, and Reinhardt was hanging out with Torbjorn's kids, and that's like, oh, okay, interesting. So it seems like they're using the comics to like do character bits, and they're using the cinematics to tell event stories, like what happens in Recall, or what happens in Alive, or what happens in the Sombra cinematic, which is like the furthest through the storyline that we are at the moment.
Right.
So what I would expect to see is, like, when there are animated shorts that introduce new characters or whatever, they will tell a little bit more of the plot line, and then we'll see comics just, you know, fill out backstories and all the rest of it.
So that brings us nicely onto events, and I guess, as you say, you don't want to double up too much with these things, because if only from a cynical marketing perspective, the more consistently you can have people talking about your game over the course of the year, the better, right? Whereas if you cluster these things too much, you get a big burst of chatter and then it all dies away. So events are another way of doing this. We've had some I think really nice events this year. I think they've
nailed these. I think this might be the thing they've done best, other than animated shorts.
Yeah, they've done really well. So I guess the thing is what we do next. We've got no Olympics this year, but we do have other things. Well, I mean, we have, there's always sporting events going on. We think there'll be a spring thing, although you think there might be a New Year thing in end of Jan. Yeah,
so they've said May is getting a new legendary in the new year. It's also Chinese New Year at the end of January. Those two things are probably going to line up, she being a Chinese character. Chinese New Year always seems to get like an event in these sort of games, not least, I think, because they have large Chinese player bases.
Yeah, exactly.
League of Legends does one, WoW does one, Dota's done them in the past.
But it probably won't be as large as
I don't think it's going to have like a game mode.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll even have that many cosmetics. It might literally just be like a couple of May legendaries and then maybe one other skin or something like that.
Yeah.
But then, I think after that we'll get a big spring event. They've done a seasonal one for the others. Winter, autumn was the Halloween event. Summer was the summer games.
Easter's the obvious thing to theme it with, right?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of interesting because, like, so WoW has an Easter event. It's called Noble Garden. And so far they've kind of based the events off what they've done in WoW in the past. But like I feel like Easter doesn't have the same, global relevance as something like the Olympics or
Possibly
Halloween.
Not.
Christmas obviously isn't something that's celebrated everywhere, but there is usually a winter thing everywhere, like, winter celebration of some kind, end of the year type deal. So I don't know if that's what it will be, or if it might be some kind kind of harvest thing. It kind of depends. We'll see what happens there, but I can't imagine there not being one within the next 2 or 3 months.
I think Easter this year falls in about mid-April, so that would kind of make sense from a time perspective. We've got a World Cup next year, so there's potential for something to be linked into that, like they did with the Olympics. You know, the World Cup's kind of a global event.
Yeah, they did say that the Summer Games wasn't tied to the Olympics. Like when it ended, people were like, "Oh, I want to do this next year," and they were like, "Okay, yeah, we will do it next year." It just might, the branding might be different or whatever. I think, they want to bring those skins back. They don't want to just waste all that stuff. And you can only get it once in 2016 and that's the end, so yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think, you talk about WoW and they do, as you, like one of these a month. I don't think we're going to get to that point with Overwatch because it seems like more of an investment, like
I think so, yeah.
If nothing else, the art assets from Overwatch require a little bit more detailing.
Yeah, like it's more complicated. Like a lot of these WoW events were made in 2007 or whatever when, it was like half the number of textures or something, so.
But there's also potentially, for one reason and another, a shift in your odds of getting things out of loot boxes come next year. And we were talking about this in the office the other day.
Yeah, so on May 1st, the Chinese government have said if you sell loot boxes, you need to tell everyone the odds in your game. And that law will go into effect on May 1st. As far as I know, it's as a law as much as anything. So, this isn't something they can just go, nah, it's all right, which doesn't apply to us.
Yeah, but there remain questions to be answered, right? Like, do they have to tell you the odds of getting one if you're playing in China? Or do they have to tell you the global odds? Do the global odds vary? Like, we've done a lot of research into loot box odds. So if you are interested in it, there's plenty of stuff on the site you can read about it. But we don't know how far and wide the pronouncements of odds are going to have to come. As we say, we don't actually know if they vary from territory to territory. So it's difficult to say for everyone what this is going to mean.
And it could even be something where Blizzard could say, okay, we'll tell you, but we'll tell you, and we don't want you to tell anyone else. And maybe I don't know, maybe they can make a deal with whatever the Chinese regulatory board is where that happens. Because obviously, this stuff, right, we want to know, and there's kind of a moral thing where maybe people really should know. There's a whole gambling angle. Not something I really have the expertise to talk about, I don't think. But there's also a thing where whatever odds they use are probably really, really well researched. Using a lot of different data from 12 years of World of Warcraft and all the rest of it, and probably stuff reaching all the way back to even stuff like Diablo, right? The data that they use to make these odds is very valuable. It's worth a lot of money, and exactly how these odds work is also worth a lot of money, because whatever it is, it's probably scientifically the most satisfying way that researchers can tell us humans think. They won't want to publicize that if they can avoid it, just from a pure kind of, this is our work, in the same reason that we don't have the Overwatch source code, right? This stuff is hard to make. No, they haven't sent me it over. I keep asking. This stuff is hard to make, and it has legal protections on it. So exactly how all of that will break down.
If all they have to come out and say is, oh, you have an X% chance of getting a legendary skin.
Yeah, raising to Y over X period.
Fine.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know how much tangible difference it's going to make. It's not like people are going to go, oh, it's 31%, not 30.5%. Well, I'm never playing Overwatch again ever. It would be one of those things people will go, oh, right, okay, and then just start buying loads more loot boxes again.
Exactly,
I'm not sure how much of a difference it'll make. It will be interesting to see how it unfolds, though. Right, our final section this week is on the Overwatch League, which I think we're all sort of quite excited / interested / don't really know what the hell's going to happen next year, because they've announced it with this hugely ambitious plans, this whole kind of collegiate system, which fascinating if it works, but boy, it might not. I suppose with looking at next year as not the culmination of that vision, but the groundwork being laid for that in the long run, right?
Yeah, for sure. By the end of next year, or halfway through next year, you're not going to have this multinational, worldwide, multi-level league system.
You know what I mean? I say, Mum, Dad, I'm off to Overwatch College.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're not going to be attending your local combine in the hope of being drafted into a mid-tier team and building a career on being a pretty good Overwatch player. That's not going to happen. It's still going to be 20 teams or something that are actually able to pay people at a decent rate, and everyone else being pretty far behind, I expect. But it is going to be the year where we start to see a lot of this stuff come into play. I expect we'll see certain teams perhaps become based around cities. Like we were saying, I think it was a couple of weeks ago with Misfits being in Stockholm and all the rest of it, Rogue being in Paris. I expect we'll see that. expect a lot of change. Expect a lot of things that maybe we won't understand while they're happening, because teams will be making decisions based on information they have that Blizzard hasn't yet announced. And we'll also see like serious shakeups in probably, team makeups. We've already seen this start to happen with the Luminosity Misfits Rogue deal that happened a couple of weeks ago. And I also expect that Blizzard are going to mess it up.
Well, I don't know if it'll be a mess up, but it's hard, right?
It's real hard
to get this stuff working. And as you say, there'll be a load of deals going on behind the scenes, contracts being worked out, structures for teams and competitions and payouts and all of that stuff will be being worked out at the moment. But that stuff takes a long time to do. There's loads of moving parts. There's loads of people who have a stake in it. So I think all we can hope to see is just like the first steps towards what they've promised being put down next year. And there will be missteps, of course. Yeah. Like there will be things that we don't understand, you guys don't understand, that some of which won't make sense at all, some of which probably will make sense over time. We're just going to have to kind of wait and see how it plays out. But I like it as an idea. I think for the game's competitive ecosystem, it's a really nice, ambitious idea. It probably won't ever come to full fruition in the way that they've advertised, because these things rarely do. But it will be interesting to see how much of it we get to see next year and kind of where they start to roll it out. Yeah,
to put it into perspective, it's like if you were trying to set up the NBA while the NFL and the NHL were being set up, because like there's all the complexities of trying to build this system while you're also competing with League of Legends, Dota 2, Counter-Strike Global Offensive, like the legion of like smaller esports games like Smite and Rainbow Six Siege, all of whom are doing their absolute best to drag in viewers and get people interested in their game. Overwatch has a lot of advantages. Like it's got Blizzard behind it, who've been running esports for 20 years. Loads of really, really experienced people there that have set up these sort of things before. It's also got a lot of money and a lot of players, which is really helpful. 25 million sales or whatever. That gives you a lot of leg up on a lot of those second tier games I'm talking about. But it's also like it's just going to be difficult, even if without all of those problems. So yeah, we'll see what happens. I'm pretty excited for it. This week, I'm actually going to start researching and hopefully get out a piece about like basically everything we know about it, because there's been quite a lot of sneaky kind of behind the scenes stuff that's kind of leaked out a little bit that I want to try and gather into one place. All of that will be on the website, hopefully before the end of the week, hopefully tomorrow.
Okay, that's it for this week's show. Do join us next week when we won't have an episode of Overwatch This, but we will have a special PCGamesN blooper reel in which we're all going to be showing you the embarrassing things we've done on VO over the course of the year. So that'll be very entertaining for everyone. But Overwatch This will be back in the new year, so please do join us then.